Talkative, sometimes strays from the topic. Noticeable restlessness. Mild to moderate deficit in working memory and concentration. Yes, these are actual notes from the ADHD assessment that led to my diagnosis at the age of 37. But how did I get here? A few years ago, I came across videos on YouTube by people like Jessica McCabe, Alex Partridge, or Rich and Rocks from the channel ADHD Love. And I remember exactly the moment when I thought, wait, are they talking about me? But from finding similarities with people in the videos to getting a medical report, there's still quite a long way to go. And I also wasn't sure whether it was ADHD or maybe anxiety, burnout, or something completely different, because those can show up in very similar ways too. So let's look at the 3 stages of discovering whether it might be ADHD. But first, let's pause for a moment because here's a disclaimer. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a therapist, or anything like that. I'm simply a university-educated person living life with ADHD who found out about her diagnosis later in life and started reading a ton and learning a lot about it. So what I'm sharing here is my personal experience and what I've learned from reading nonfiction books. So no self-diagnosing based on my videos. All right?
One more disclaimer for my English-speaking viewers before we continue. I'm from the Czech Republic, so my experience comes from a healthcare system with mandatory public health insurance. In my case, visits to psychiatrists and clinical psychologists were fully covered by insurance. There are also private specialists and clinics available, and those can be expensive, but they often have much shorter waiting times than providers covered by public insurance. The situation can be very different in other countries. Access to assessment, diagnosis, and treatment may depend heavily on insurance coverage, availability of specialists, and personal finances. For many people, the cost of getting evaluated can be a significant barrier. So please keep in mind that I'm describing my experience within the Czech healthcare system, and your local reality may look very different.
Phase 1, discovery. These are exactly those videos or even books and podcasts where you find yourself thinking that this perfectly describes your life. And also why you sometimes feel like an oddball, or that the people around you don't understand you at all. You finally found someone who validates your life experience, and that can be a big aha moment. Just be careful not to use the ADHD label to cover up something a little different. Burnout, anxiety, chronic stress, or depression can just as easily cause problems with concentration, procrastination, and forgetfulness too. And for women, hormonal changes can also play a role. In the case of ADHD, these symptoms are usually present already in childhood. It's just that you often don't connect the dots until much later. The fact that you recognize yourself in ADHD content doesn't necessarily mean you actually have ADHD. But at the same time, it also doesn't mean you're making things up. It simply means that it's time to find out what's really behind these difficulties. Phase 2, self-screening. Okay, so you've started to seriously consider it, and maybe you've even worked up the courage to make an appointment somewhere. But between making the call or sending the email and actually arriving at the doctor's office, several weeks or even months can often pass. So what can you do in the meantime? Or maybe you're still hesitating, wondering if this really applies to you, so you're looking for more validation. Self-screening is basically gathering evidence. You ask yourself, what could explain my difficulties? What actually seems suspicious to me? How long have I been like this, and what impact does it have on my own life? You can try looking into your family history. Does anyone in your family have ADHD? Many adults only start addressing their own diagnosis when their child is diagnosed. Think back to your own childhood. When did any cases or symptoms of what troubles you now first appear? And take all of this with you to your appointment with a psychologist or psychiatrist. Phase 3, diagnosis. And from now on, it will be purely personal. My own experience with how I got to my diagnosis. No instructions, nothing universal, just my experience. I worked for a company whose boss had ADHD and talked about it quite openly. I got labeled by his son as the lady with ADHD. I really enjoyed that particular job. I put an incredible amount into it, so much so that within just a few months, maybe 4, I reached the brink of burnout.
If you'd like to learn more about this part of my story, I wrote a blog post about it, called Pokemon, Burnout, and Me, How I Lost My Dream Job in 4 Months. You can find the link in the description below.
Then a difficult period came and the company got rid of me. I went to my general practitioner and confided in her that I thought I might have ADHD. She gave me a very quick ADHD test right there on the spot, and the result was pretty borderline. However, she referred me to a psychiatrist. With the psychiatrist, we then did the same test, just in a much more extensive version, and even that came out pretty borderline for me. Based on our initial conversations, we first started addressing emotional instability and sleep problems, and she also referred me to a clinical psychologist. I was lucky. I only had to wait just under 2 months for the examination with him, and I had 2 sessions ahead of me. In the first session, we mainly discussed my history and also the reason why I came to see him. And in the second session, it was time for the tests. For an hour and a half, I was stacking blocks, copying pictures, rearranging numbers and letters, searching for symbols, and doing a lot of other tasks whose purpose wasn't entirely clear to me at the time. And at the end, I felt like I had just completed a mental marathon. About 2 weeks later, I received a report in which the psychologist summarized the findings from our conversation. He summarized my history, added the results of his own observations, and most importantly, the results of the test I had taken. And so here we have some interesting findings. The patient arrives early, is well-groomed, and her clothing features some childlike motifs. The childlike motifs made me laugh. I wear t-shirts with video game designs, and I pretty much consider them my signature clothing. And arriving early was a necessity because I was getting there by public transport. I didn't really know the place. I was afraid I'd have trouble finding it, so I left ridiculously early, and in a way, it was a kind of overcompensation. At times, she strays from the topic. The conversation needs to be structured. Well, of course. Noticeable restlessness, lively emotionality, slightly unstable. That's exactly me.
The results revealed something that honestly didn't surprise me all that much. Overall, my scores fell within the above average range, but there were also noticeable differences between individual areas. While I performed very well on some tasks, my weaker results showed up in working memory, sustained attention, and tasks that required me to work quickly and accurately under time pressure. The report even stated that I showed a mild to moderate deficit in working memory, attention, and processing speed.
In other words, my brain handles complex connections well, but it has to work much harder on things that others consider obvious. And with this result, I went back to the psychiatrist. In my case, it's precisely the differences between above-average results in logical and visual tasks, but significantly below average in monotonous and time-limited tasks. For many years, I compensated for this lack of ability to keep several things together in my head at once by relying on my other intellectual abilities. But it's incredibly exhausting. And that's exactly the moment when you might think, smart, but can't keep up, which is an experience described by many women diagnosed with ADHD later in life. We're not incapable, but our strengths mask the areas where normal functioning costs us much more energy. In short, it's just harder to recognize in us. We've been masking for so long that even several hour-long tests often can't definitively say, yes, it's ADHD. But only, this result indicates that it could be the case. And how about you? Are you still searching for answers, or have you already gone and gotten your official label? Let me know in the comments, and if you don't feel like sharing so publicly, join my favorite ADHD community on School. Because sometimes all we need is a safe space where we can share our experiences and stories without fear of judgment.